Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider series. Today, I am so happy to have Matt Rhodes-Kropf, who is really an amazing person because he's practiced both the investment as well as the teaching. And so, Matt, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So, I would like to hear your story, and of course, you're going to drop big names, but can you tell us how you got into venture capital, both practicing and teaching?
Sure. I got in kind of strangely. I knew nothing about venture capital. I didn't know I was headed toward venture capital. I also never thought I would be a professor and was not heading toward being a professor. So, with no plan and no intent to do either, I ended up in both. Um, my father was a fighter pilot. My grandfather was a fighter pilot. They told me not to join a club I could not quit. A few issues after Vietnam. And so I was encouraged when I was young to go be a business person. So, sure, I was going to be a business person. None of us, of course, actually knew what that meant, but that's all right. Uh, so when I got to college, I bought a bar because that's in my mind what a business person did. You see a business and you own and run a business. So uh, that actually kind of begins my whole journey because it sets up a bunch of stuff. So one is not a rich kid because obviously my dad was a fighter pilot. So I had to talk other people into buying the bar with me. My wife, I have 4 kids, so she bought the bar with me. My college roommate, who's still an investor in my fund, uh, and a couple of people who bought the bar with me were getting their PhDs in economics. So, for pretty much no good reason, I end up with a PhD in game theory. Again, I don't think I'm going to be a professor. I don't know who becomes a professor, but not me, somebody else. I'm going to go be a business person, right? So at that point, I opened a gym, a Gold's Gym. They were big back then, not their fault. And I'm going to own a bar, and I'm going to own a gym. I'm going to be a business person. That's my view of myself. And then Columbia University offers me a job as a finance professor. And if you're thinking, Matt, you don't know any finance, I will say I was right there with you. So I mentioned that to them. I said I have a PhD in game theory, and I run a bar and a gym. Um, but they said, come on, you'll figure it out. So I go up to Columbia because I figure I'm not really going to turn down this job. It'll get me to New York. When I get there, that's when my world kind of opens, and I realize, wait, there's like a lot more exciting businesses than bars and gyms. There's all this technology happening, other things. I get a chance to invest in something called Rackspace, which turns into a very successful thing. Axioma, which is still used today as a major risk management software. Other things. Um, and so I'm still being a professor because somebody has offered me that job. I'm finding cooler and cooler investments, and people who have invested in the bar and then invested in the gym are beginning to invest with me in all these other things. Eventually, I go far enough along that many people are following what I'm investing in. I eventually start a biotech, help a very successful guy start a biotech firm. I help somebody start a multi-strat hedge fund. I kind of, from there, it kind of all goes crazy. I leave academia, then Harvard calls. I go back to academia because it's Harvard. I leave academia again to set up now a full-time venture fund, and then MIT calls, and I'm like, academia turns out is like the mob. You can never quite get out.
So eventually, you got into a club you cannot leave.
Exactly. I'm in the club I cannot leave. So I teach at MIT now, which is a lot of fun. I teach entrepreneurship, and I run the venture capital firm with my partners.
Very nice. And your VC firm is called Tectonic Ventures. Can you share why the name?
So I when we got started, I paid even a firm. We were trying to find a name, trying to find out. I paid a firm, and they came up with some name. I can't even remember what it is. But I would have meal. I was pitching, so I'd have meals with people or whatever while I was pitching, and I would list a few names at the beginning, and at the end of the meal, I would always do the same trick. I would turn at the end and say, "Oh, which name did you like again?" And everybody would always say the same thing. Oh, Tectonic Ventures, and I don't remember the other two.
Okay, then you knew which one.
I
Okay.
was like, aha, the one that everybody remembers. But actually, it was to me by one of my entrepreneurs and a good friend. He was the one who suggested it, and so I put it on the list after he suggested it. So I got to give him full credit. Vinay Nair.
Okay. I was expecting something more smart and thoughtful about we're going to identify the tectonic shifts that are
Oh yeah,
happening.
yeah. No, no. I can do that stuff all day. You want to go there? We're finding the shifts. We're mountain building the landscape of technology. I mean, I can. We can do them all.
So
I,
I'm impressed because you started as owner of a bar and then a gym, and then you start to invest. But I want to ask one question about the game theory. How does that discipline of game theory
yeah.
helps you today in investment?
Game theory is a way of thinking. In fact, in the entire economics PhD, and then when I became a finance professor and began teaching, I began teaching valuation and other things, learning all different types of techniques, deep value, quant, all these things. It's all a discipline on a way of thinking.
Mm.
So really, I think everybody gets it because in some sense, game theory is like applying a chess-like logic to everything in life. If I do X, what do they do? Then what will they do? Then what will they do? What is everybody in this system going to do? Conditional on the state. So a lot of business is around, hey, if I do this, what's my competitor going to do, or what's my customer going to do, or how do I even strategy around deal flow, strategy around who you should be looking for, all these kinds of things are all really have a game theoretic base. So I found it very helpful, really throughout my life.
It's a good framework, and maybe I mean I can see how you could think about it as a one game, short game, or it could be a series of game, and then your credibility, your reputation matters over time. And the game theory address both. But when you think about venture capital, do you think we should think about the short game or the long game?
I, in fact, a lot of game theory is very much teaching you to think about the long game. There's a lot of repeated game technology, and the way you get to equilibrium is kind of realizing that we're playing more than once. And so, really understanding that this is a very long game. So, a lot of what we do with our entrepreneurs and how we treat our entrepreneurs, and even what we invest in, is conditional on this repeated game idea. So, for example, if we find an investment that we can put money in, let's say we decide we think that's a good investment, but we can't see any way that we help. The answer is we don't do it. And why? Well, in the short run, it's fine, assuming it's a good investment. It's fine. You'll make money on the investment, so you should do it. Except, what does that entrepreneur think of you? Not very much. And when somebody else asks them, "How was Matt as a investor?" They say, "Who?" Right? Like, I don't know. I never talked to him. He sent me over some money, and then like whatever. That's not helping me in the long run. It's not helping our firm in the long run. So we want to be investing in a place where, when we're done with that investment, that entrepreneur says enormously helpful. And this comes back to help us so much. We win the next deal almost every time because they're talking to a past entrepreneur. And if you don't think in that repeated game technology, you think, oh, no, no, just make the investment because it's a good one. And no.
In a way, it's about applying some level of superpowers to help the entrepreneurs who are going to be references in the future.
They're all going to be references, whether whether the business works out or not.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It doesn't matter. They will be a reference. You just want them to be a positive reference.
Yes, and you never know when the great entrepreneur calls one of your past entrepreneurs, and they say, and
Mm.
you lose a deal that you don't even realize why you're losing because no one calls you and says, "Oh, by the way, your former entrepreneur told everybody not to do it."
I remember my very first startup meeting just after starting TDK Ventures. I met this startup from Israel, and they're doing a sensor, and they already have a CVC investing in them beforehand, which is in the same space as TDK Ventures. I say, why would you need us if you already have them? And I remember them saying, oh, they brought no value except cash. And I remember leaving the meeting with my investment director saying, I never want to hear an entrepreneur saying this about us.
Yes.
And I feel lucky because it's like you get this shock moment right at the beginning, which influences everything you do afterwards. Now, let's talk about something that probably influenced you very early on, which is You made investment in startups very early on that became very successful. And sometimes people invest for a long time and they don't get success. And you did get success like Rackspace and others. How did that influence you? And did that create a positive bias when maybe there was a context at the time?
Um, I do think it influences you. I think one of the most difficult things about new investors, and I talk to a lot of students and help a lot of people sort of begin their journey in investing, um, is that we all do essentially the same thing. When you almost can't help it. It's a little bit of the optimal stopping problem technology if you've ever gone down the math of that. But it's you sort of sample. You're like, ooh, let me look at this startup. Let me look at that startup. Let me look at that one. And then after a certain amount of sampling, you like one. That's like it's better than the others. And this is the natural outcome of the optimal stopping problem. And you say, ooh, let me do that one. And if you have never seen a truly great team with a truly great idea, then you just don't know. So you sort of look through the sample of things that you see, and you pick the best one, and you just don't realize that, like, oh no, there are some things out there that are like really remarkable. And then you have to have this extreme patience to kind of wait and really hunt down these great ones. And it's hard if you've never seen it. And I got lucky early on and saw some great entrepreneurs um, build some really amazing companies, and then it has its own flywheel effect. People want to let you invest because because you were in the past, which I always think is a little bit funny. It's not like I made Rackspace successful or anything. Like, I mean, I'd like to take the tiniest little, yes, maybe I spoke to the CEO, gave him some ideas, whatever, come on. But then still, you kind of get branded as being successful with entrepreneurs.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, what keeps you curious after decades of research and investment?
Oh, I mean, I just am curious. Like, in some sense, everything I already know is boring. All I want is to learn. So the greatest thing about my job is that geniuses, like true geniuses who are experts in the world on certain topics, they will come and they will spend hours with me and try and help me understand it. And I can ask any question I want. I'm like, no, say it again, like I'm even dumber. And they do it. And so it's amazing. They will talk me through crazy things that they're working on, just help me try to understand how we're using light to compute AI on a chip, or new AI methods, or new business methods, or new. So I get to learn about crazy new industries, crazy new technologies, all of these kind of things. And I mean, in some sense, I don't know what keeps me curious, but that's some sense the greatest part.
I think you've just described why, if you're really curious about nearly everything, this is one of the best jobs in the world. You keep learning every day across world class experts.
Yes, yes.
All right, let me challenge you a little bit. What's a contrarian belief you have? So, one you believe with conviction that very few people have, whether it's about innovation or venture capital.
Sure. Uh, that you want to see more deals. This is like the most persistent thing in the idea. In fact, everybody even brags about it. We look at 10,000 companies a year to say yes to two of them. I, I think that is almost total nonsense. If you are looking at 10,000 companies a year, it means that they are blurring by at a zillion miles an hour. I don't know how you tell the forest from the trees. It's a little like saying, I'm hunting for a needle in a haystack, and what I'd really like is more haystacks. What? No. What I'd really like is less hay and more needles. Okay? Less hay, more needles. And in some sense, so we spend a lot of time essentially trying to carve things out of our deal flow channels, and instead get deal flow channels that have lots of needles in them. And instead of this sort of, I think, crazy idea of, no, I'm going to be able to tell instantly that it's a genius idea. So just show me 700 ideas today and I'll pick out the great one.
I love
And
it. That's a real golden nugget. I remember early on at TDK Ventures, we did say when we reached 1,000 startups we looked at, 2,000 startups we looked at. We stopped saying it externally. We still say it internally, and I don't know if it's vanity or not, But the reason is we want to show that we are at 0.5% quite constantly of what we've seen versus what we invest. And I think it's a message more to the mothership to say we are very disciplined. But actually,
It's literally one of these stats that if you weren't measuring it, it would actually make a lot of sense.
mm,
Okay. If you were not measuring it, if you didn't know, if nobody knew, if nobody was ever going to look at this stat, no one had ever thought of it, and then you just randomly walked up to a venture capital firm, you would probably like to see a higher number of things because it would tell you something about their ability to find things. The problem is the second you're like measuring it or think it's cool or whatever, then you crank up your deal flow. Let me get more deal flow. Let me get that channel going and this channel going. Oh my God, I can look at hundreds of deals a day if you want. It's like no problem at all. You want me to look at hundreds of deals? Fine. So then it just becomes like, no, this is a strange vanity metric around something. What I really would want is if I could measure every deal, like let's say as it came in the door, there was like a quality measure of it. Then the only thing I would actually want is the number of high quality deals that walk through my door. Even if I didn't say yes to all, I'm not saying only yeses, but like if we could just carve out all of the low quality ones and they never came to us, and all I saw was high quality deals, that'd be awesome. That'd be the best deal flow ever. And if I only looked at 100 high quality deals a year, wow, mwah, wow. What I mean, in fact, shoot, can I look at 20 super high quality deals a year? That would be a dream. That would be wonderful. I could spend so much time with them. I could learn. And I want to get rid of all the ones that you know are going to turn out to be nonsense, like because you get in there and you find out they don't have the background, they don't have the chops, they don't have the technology, whatever it is. We waste so much time on all this like noise.
I think the signal to noise is one thing, but at the same time, I think there is an element of serendipity. I'm sure Rackspace was somehow random at first. Then, of course, as you play this long game that repeats and you get credibility, less so. How would you guide, let's say you're a first time VC or CVC, how would you guide people in terms of thinking of sourcing?
Yeah. What is you? What should you be looking at? What is right for for you? So for example, when I first got going, how did I get Rackspace? Well, my best friend's sister married one of the co-founders of Rackspace. We were buddies because we had all gone on vacation together because I hung out with his family. And he, when he got going with Rackspace, said, Matt, come and take a look at this. I think I've really got something. So I knew I had an insider look. I knew he was extremely good and high quality. I knew he wasn't lying to me in any way. Like I had all of these advantages in that deal, and I did that deal. And Axioma was the same. He was a professor at Columbia. He was a genius. He was strongly ethical. I mean, I knew a lot about him. I happened to be playing soccer with him one night, and he looked a little depressed. And when the soccer game was over, uh, I said, "You look a little depressed. What's going on?" He said, I think I have a little startup. I think I'm gonna have to shut it down." And I was like, "Oh, can I help?" I got in. I learned what he was doing. I got to give him money. And it wasn't that I was out randomly like what a lot of people are doing is like, oh, let me look at everything that's gone up and down Silicon Valley 200 times, and then I'll just choose the good ones. What? No, you won't. They were all selected already, unless you assume everybody in Silicon Valley is an idiot. Like, no, they're probably selected. So, what is that deal flow source that's right for you? And this could be anything. I mean, I don't want to in some sense give somebody their shtick, but like let's say you're like a super marketing guru and you've been going to all the marketing conferences for years and whatever okay, you probably should get your deal flow in and around marketing and whatever else. A good example actually was I was talking with McLaren for a little while. They were thinking about setting up a venture arm, and it was like almost perfect. Like, as you know, corporate venturing gets kind of a bad label, and because they often do it wrong and for wrong reasons. But here, like they were essentially putting all this automotive technology in business because they did these tiny run cars. So they didn't need mass production or anything. They just needed
Yep.
a working, awesome technology. So they would literally they find these technologies and they put them in the McLaren. And then once it's in the McLaren, the company goes to like Audi and says, we're in a McLaren.
Yep.
And so that was one, they were seeing and putting into business all sorts of automotive technologies. And two, they're the coolest brand on earth. So like who wouldn't want McLaren on their cap table? Like They could come into one of my deals. I'd be like, yeah, sure.
I mean, it talks about leading edge technology and getting into the highest performance and everything else.
Everything, it all fits, right? And you can see like what deal flow should they do? Exactly that. They have the right to win, they have the knowledge to win, they have the thing. And so they should and would, destroy me or any sort of VC at like that.
Yeah, because the superpower is so obvious. It gives you a quick go-to-market to prove your technology with such a brand and credibility and high standards. You can win everyone else afterwards.
Yes. And it's still to this day, I think they should start a venture arm. If you're listening, McLaren, call me. I think you should start a venture arm.
Well, I can help you with some connections. We have a partnership with McLaren, so let's talk after the podcast. Um, but I want to double click on what you just said, which is CVCs are a bad label sometimes, or maybe most times. Um, if you were to start a CVC today, so let's say McLaren, but maybe not McLaren, but a good one which you believe has a superpower, how would you start the CVC in a way that you believe you're going to be successful over the long term?
Yeah. The difficulty is this incentives of the corporation relative to the incentives of the people and the incentives of the entrepreneurs. It's already hard in venture capital to get alignment, and we get a lot of screwed up things between venture capitalists who are, well-known jerks. And in some sense, the reason is where the incentives misalign, you're going to get sort of upsetness. In corporate, the kind of the problem is that the incentives are not aligned. And so everything I would do would be an attempt to both understand those and just make the organization aware. Because a lot of times they go in thinking, my gosh, we're XYZ Corporation. Everybody should want our money. And it's like, no. Understand why, understand what the problem is. So a classic one, we're going to rotate people through the CVC and give them 2-year stints so that they learn about technology related to our business.
Mm.
Cool idea from the mothership point of view, right? We're trying to train executives. We're trying to get, we want them to be knowledgeable about cutting edge. Great. Terrible from the entrepreneur's point of view. Who am I talking to? Who's behind this deal? Who even cares about this deal any longer? The deal becomes some orphan deal that some partner did 6 years ago that is no longer there. Like, so it's sort of a classic mistake. And then I would help, like, that's just one of many. How would you try to fight those two incentives?
I always think about it as a four legs win. You have the entrepreneur, of course, you have the team in the CVC, you have the co investors, and you have the mothership. And if it's a lose for any of the four, you're going to have a problem.
Yes. And it's always going to be, there's always going to be some competing incentives. Like, that's fine. We're all in different places. We just acknowledge them and then lay out there how we're dealing with them as best we can. And then that's all you can do. And then sort of recognize your weaknesses, right? Like, okay, I should not be winning that kind of deal. Like, and I won't. Or where is it? What deal should I absolutely win? The McLaren example is perfect, right? There is a deal that they should absolutely win. What's that for this entity, whatever it is?
Yeah. But I like the fact you would work straight on the incentive, understanding the incentives, and making sure it works for the full ecosystem. One thing that I've seen, for example, is when people talk about a win-win. But win-win, when it's four legs and it's a win-win, let's say, with just the entrepreneur and the corporation, let's say you're providing a service from the corporations, but because of that, you have request of first refusal. Sounds about right, except for the co-investors. That's terrible for them. And so that's why I think your answer is really interesting because it's about understanding the incentives before you even try to influence or tweak the incentives.
Yes. And then understand sort of why you maybe shouldn't ask for that, right? Like, even if you can get it, it's like it might not be right. It might not be right for your reputation, i.e., am I going to win another deal? It might not be right for the co-investors. So then, are they going to invite you in another deal or tell the next entrepreneur not to take you? It's like just a lot of times people are very short run, particularly if you've been assigned to this for the current year. Answer: why shouldn't I take this right, or why shouldn't I take this thing? And like, okay, well, because it's a long run game. That's what we were talking about.
And I think in the example you gave, where if people recycle every 2 years, they come with zero institutional knowledge. they come fresh, they may repeat the same mistakes from their predecessors.
Yes, same mistakes, but also literally no long run incentives. So in some sense, they are no longer playing the repeated game; they're playing the one shot game. And playing a game with a one shot game is just you're much more aggressive in a one shot game, right? Where
Actually, it's not quite true. They're playing the one shot game to the entrepreneur, but the long game for the corporation.
yes, yes, they're still playing a repeated game this way, but
Yes,
this way they're super aggressive. They don't care if other VCs don't like them. They don't care if other entrepreneurs don't like them. They just want
yeah,
to make the boss happy.
exactly. Which is, I think, what I've seen too many times. People come, become the head of the CVC for 2 years, but they know they are going to become a VP afterwards. What can you expect for the entrepreneurs? It's not going to work out. It's going to be terms that doesn't make sense. So I want to talk about maybe the other side of the 2 years. You've got decades of investing practice. Why do you think investors with decades of practice will have an advantage versus people who don't? And I'm asking you because you, without the investing practice, got really successful early on. So you could argue there is an element of success that doesn't need decades.
Yeah, it does not need decades, and in fact, there's things that because I have decades, I should be doing and things I shouldn't be doing. Almost exactly like what we talked about. You know what I probably shouldn't be investing in? A new dating app. Really? Wouldn't you be like a little weirded out? Like what is Matt doing in a new dating app? Like that not my expertise. I don't know anything about it. I don't know what the kids do today. I don't know how to talk to each other. I don't know. Right? Like I'm out. And who should be doing that? Pretty young VC. They're going to have a much better understanding of the world. Maybe there's so I can think of 10 things they should be investing in. What am I more likely to be investing in? A deeply technical founder creating a solution for a business problem. I can get deep inside of a corporation, talk to lots of different people, really understand the problem, the economics behind the problem, and find value there. So my experience does help me, but it helps me in a very particular way with a very particular set of investments. And so often I see a cool, young, hip something, something, and I'm like, I don't know. Seems cool and hip. I don't probably make a lot of money. I have no idea. I don't have a good way to get my arms around it. And maybe, but like maybe a younger one of my partners does. And so they're, uh,
I think it's back to what you said earlier. What is you? And it has to resonate with who you are, what you can bring to the entrepreneur.
I would really, I tell this too, because I deal with students who are not just thinking about venture capital, but they're thinking about being a hedge fund or deep value or a debt market is is in some sense really instead of saying to yourself, "Hey, I want to be a VC because that sounds really cool," because it does sound really cool at a cocktail party. But every day you've got to put your money, your reputation on the line, your human capital into a deal. What do you want to be investing in? Even like early stage versus series A is very different. What do you want to be investing in? What do you're like, oh, I get all excited when it's super early. No, I get all excited when there's real data. No, I get all excited when there's much more data and we can look at trend lines or when it whatever you get excited about. I get excited about debt. I love that feeling of like we're never gonna lose money, but we're just gonna we're gonna make little bits on everything. You make a lot of money in the debt markets. You know what I mean? Like so it doesn't matter deep value, quant funds, venture capital, early stage. Who are you? What do you like in some sense putting your money in or your human capital in? And then narrow that out within your field. Just because you said I'm early stage, fine. Are you a fashion focused person? Are you, a deeply technical kind of investor? Whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Now, of course, I talk about you also doing a academic track, but from what I've seen in your videos, it's very applied type of teaching where people come and they try things, they come back the week after and they have to do some progress and present. Can you speak to the value of applied teaching versus just theories? Although I'm sure you touch on theories too, but the applied part.
Okay, so what you're just looking at is me over my life. So I am a game theorist, which is really like a branch of mathematics more than anything else. And my early papers are in auction theory, and they are mathematical models that are pure theoretical representations of the world around M&A. Some of my most well known work, and And even today, my latest paper is a theoretical representation of decision making inside a venture capital firm. The question is, how should you make a decision? We all know what we would do if you're starting a venture capital firm anywhere, CVC, outside, whatever. What would you do? You put together a committee. I mean, like, there's no one on earth who's not like, we put together a committee. And who should you have on the committee? Well, like people with different backgrounds, maybe the R&D person, a finance person. Okay, so we're going to put together this committee. Now the question is, how do you make a decision? Unanimity, majority rules, supermajority. How about just one person can do the deal? And like people laugh, but like you go, we also interviewed the top 100 venture capital firms in the world, and the answer is one person can push a deal. And like, what? Why? And so then we theoretically model what would the world need to look like for that to be actually the correct decision. And then you can ask yourself, do you think the world looks like that? That's your own choice. So even then, we're still doing theoretical, kind of mathematical modeling to try to understand the intuition behind decision making in venture capital.
I think
Teach though, when I teach though, it's much more applied. Like that is like not needed for like, okay, I got to get out there, I got to find a deal, I got to close a deal.
yeah, but it's interesting because it feels like an administrative part to choose a committee, but it's going to impact everything you do afterwards because even the investment proposals will be tailored to what the investment committee is shaped as, how it's voting. We don't have a consensus voting for TDK Ventures, but I can imagine if we had, we would probably try to do way more preparation with everyone inside the committee versus a majority rule versus a one person can say silver bullet, we go for it.
Right.
Yeah.
And uh, it really changes what you invest in. Like that's part of what we show is like mathematically you will change what you're investing in if you use these different types of rules, from majority rules to supermajority to unanimity to one person.
So I wrote about this, which is I think corporations like consensus
Yep.
because they have a distribution law type of outcomes.
And it literally, when we were talking about the things that VC corporate VCs do wrong, this is literally one of the problems that we talk about at the end of the paper. It seems so. I mean, corporations are consensus entities. They run by getting the finance team on board, the IT team on board, the R&D. Like you, when you're doing business, and then you start to do venture, and you say, "Well, we should do the exact same thing. Let's make sure finance likes it. Let's make sure operating group likes it. Let's make sure R&D likes it. Let's make sure IT likes it." But the answer is no. In early stage startups, there is nothing that all those people are going to like. It's all horrible at first. The finance looks terrible, or it's not even close on IT standards, and you'll get some weird, mushy, middle of the road businesses that are like not very innovative and not very exciting. If you wait for the ones that everybody sort of says, yeah, that sounds good, but nobody's really excited about.
And when you invest in early stage like you do, the level of uncertainty is very high. Most of them will probably go to zero, but some would go very, very high. This kind of power law type of outcome. And I think that's what probably drives this idea of the fewer people voting yes should be driving the decision.
It's true, but it also even shifts you. Like, let's imagine that we were together with 9 other people on a giant committee that we were all going to vote on. What would it take for you to say yes? Like, think about it carefully.
Mm.
What's going to matter here? When is your vote going to matter? Your vote is only going to matter if everybody else has said yes and you say no. If other people have already said no, your vote is completely irrelevant. We have unanimity is required. So your vote matters in exactly one moment. 9 people have said yes, and it's up to you. You're kind of gonna go with yes, even if you're like, I mean, 9 other people are saying yes. I'm a yes. Now let's imagine on that same committee, it's one person can do the deal. When are you gonna say yes? Well, there's only one moment that your vote matters. Everyone else has said no. If anybody else has said yes, we're already doing the deal, right? We're already doing the deal. So now everyone else has said no, and you're going to say, no, guys, you're all wrong. You're going to do that when you're like, no, you don't understand. There's something here that's magnificent. And so you're going to catch this weird little magnificence that one person believes in, but super strongly. Because why would you have to be strong believer if you're voting yes while 9 other people vote no? And so you're just going to catch a completely different type of deal if you're looking, between unanimity yes and a one person says yes, yes. It's just a completely different yes.
So last week I heard it's a top tier VC in the space we work with. There are five people in the investment committee. They score 1 to 5, but you just need one person giving five and it goes ahead.
Yes.
And that I thought was so powerful.
We interviewed all of the top, like 100 top firms, and we asked both formally and informally because it's important. Formally, a lot of them have rules that are a little more formal, but informally, the answer was always, yeah, one person kind of, I love this, and in the early stages, the deal gets done. The deal gets done. One person,
Yeah.
and yet very few CVCs are like, yeah, yeah, yeah. We have a committee, but we just wait for one person to like it, and then we do it. Like, it would almost be like he would blow the CFO's mind. He would be like, "What? That's the way you make decisions? Have you idiots all lost your mind?"
It's very interesting. I think so at TDK Ventures, as long as the investment director is convinced and they've gone through the steps, including diverse advocate session, by design, I don't have a veto right. We go to that investment committee with three corporate officers, two votes enough. But the value of that is it gives a signal to everyone inside TDK that this is blessed to be TDK long term strategy, which means we can unlock that superpower that we need to build value for the entrepreneurs.
Right. This is what I mean by, like, it's not so easy. You can't just say, "Oh, well, Matt said we should have one person do the deal," and then you're like, "Great, so we'll have one person do the deal." It's like, well, okay, but that would create a whole nother set of problems inside the firm, and not only that, but there's incentive problems with it. Like, on my team of only 3 of us, and we all get paid on the carry. Like, one person can do the deal, but we're pretty sure we're aligned. Like, you know what I mean? Whereas maybe somebody's there for 2 years, they just want to have a deal under their name so they can say they had a deal. You know what I mean? Like, we're not so sure their incentives are even lined up correctly. But then you even named another one. What if the rest of the firm doesn't believe in it then? Oh, one person said yes. Like, we don't have to pay any attention to this. Like, the CFO didn't buy in, the head of R&D didn't buy in. Like, we are not paying any attention. So you kind of need them bought in.
So more and more CVCs start to have carry models, some kind of carry models. My personal belief is you're a true VC not because of the carry, but because of the GP commit. Can you speak to whether you agree or disagree with that?
Uh, yes, or it's not the carry per se. So you probably need to give your team carry, because otherwise, if they actually happen to turn out to be good and make some great investments, they're all leaving.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
in some sense, there's a market price for good VCs, and it pays carry. So feel free to mispay your people, but, like, on any role, right? I mean, why don't you just pay your AI scientists $100,000? Then they would be cheaper. Okay, you just won't keep any AI scientists. That's cool though. You do it. So that's like when people say, "Oh, I'm going to not pay my VC partners very well inside the firm." I'm like, all right, knock yourself out, but you're just going to get bad ones over time. Everybody's going to leave. So, in some sense, I think that's why you need to pay them to carry. The carry on, like, some deals or in some, like, it doesn't really incentivize you to work hard. When you get into a small partnership, the whole firm is our firm. We only go on and live if we raise another fund. We have this very strong incentive that is more than carry on this fund. It's like in Tectonic Ventures, we want this to work. We want each other's deals to work. We're happy. I'll spend an enormous amount of time on, quote unquote, somebody else's deal. Like, it's not somebody else's deal. It's our deal. We have our deals. So it's a very much there's an alignment there that comes from more than we share carry. We share a firm in a sense. And do we all? The GP commit is a part of it. Uh,
Wait,
But we all have so much of our lives tied up in this. It's really just about where's your heart, and, like, do you want to make this go or not? Whether or not.
now I want to talk about risk. What do you think we get wrong about risk and maybe startup valuation, because at the end, valuation is all about risk adjusted pricing. What do you think we get wrong most of the time?
Okay, so this is going to be not the answer to the question you just asked, but a slightly broader question. I think the thing we get wrong about risk the most is we misunderstand risk in our lives. And when we are at these levels where we're deciding what kind of jobs we're going to take, McKinsey, investment banking, CVC, like the risk is a boring life. So everybody's like, oh, it'll be risky to do a startup. Huh? You know what happens when your startup doesn't work out? You go get another job. What? That's not risk. So this whole thing is like people have just misunderstood risk. They're like, often my students are like, I don't know, I could do the startup or I could take the job. I'm like, or you could do the startup, fail, and then take the job. Like that's not risk, okay? That's good outcome or good outcome. Like so I think that that is one part about this whole area where people are like, it's so risky to be a startup entrepreneur. Really? Is it though? Okay. Or a VC. Like, is it? I don't know. I'm probably pretty employable. If this doesn't work out, I'll do something else. Risk in our portfolio is a hard one that we like. We talk about a lot. We debate a lot. I debate with other VCs. And obviously, it's all this circular, like, so should we wait for an entrepreneur that wants to get, is willing to give a very low valuation so we can buy a lot of the firm with a little bit of money? Or is that by definition an entrepreneur who's not so good at fundraising, doesn't have a great idea, doesn't have the right background, whatever the reasons are that the price is this low? Why is the price this low? And so like, and if you could instead get into a higher price, like the higher price deal is not worse. It has to be multiplied by the probability of success. The thing, of course, that we don't know. So there's this terrible, like almost circular logic of, well, maybe you should just do the deal that starts at $30 million, right? Right away. Their initial pre-seed round is $30 million valuation, but at least it's an amazing team and they've got some crazy good idea. Or maybe you're like, no, that's nutty. That's completely mispriced, and what you need to be doing is finding the deal that's way under 10 million and then getting a much better economic, because that'll be obviously a 3x just to get to 30, let alone that multiplies up. And
Perhaps
obviously
I'll ask a question about something I've seen you talking about the market the private equity is willing to pay will ripple down. Sometimes I look at the valuations like not North America, but Europe or even India, and they feel like so much cheaper. But actually, price adjusted with the outcomes, it's priced in. So can you speak to maybe the misconception of lower valuation in other geographies or different verticals?
in some place, in some sense of the word, it's everywhere. Every time you're looking at any price, the question is like, isn't it just priced in? So if there are prices that are lower in India, well, isn't it like, is it really like, oh my gosh, the whole world doesn't know, cheap, amazing deals in India and everywhere else bad? It's possible, but that's what you'd have to believe, that like you're the only one to figure out that's the thing. So it's often it's I think the funniest place you see it is everybody who invests at whatever stage they invest at, they think everyone after them is like shooting fish in a barrel, and everyone before them is like lost their mind and is randomly picking. Right? It's hard where they are. After it's easy. Before it's like stupid. No one can do it. And this is a famous idea, but but the thing that people miss in that statement is it's all in the price,
Yes.
and that's true everywhere. So if you're doing this round, yes, you have more information than doing the round before, but that information is all in the price.
Yeah.
And if you do the latest next round, well, that's just all in the price. Making the decision just as difficult because it's at that price should I do it? And so all over the world, it's yeah, of course the price. I mean, even in this country, you could do a deal in Alabama, it's cheaper than you do a deal in SF. It just turns out that a lot more great outcomes occur out of the SF deals. So you'd have to believe you were either the only person to figure out that there were good deals in Alabama, or you have some incredible insights into the SF quality deals that are happening in Alabama or Indiana or India. It doesn't matter like whether we're talking a different country or not. It is a part of the price, unless you have some good reason to think it isn't, that you have some window or reason to believe that it's not in the price. And that's the most important part. It's not just like it's cheaper.
Mm.
It's no, 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 no. I have an insight here. It is too cheap, right? Or it's cheaper, but it's too expensive. We actually shouldn't be doing it. It's cheaper, but not cheap enough.
Maybe it's a good time to talk about luck because I find what's difficult about VC is that sometimes people do get lucky. They
Not
get to
me,
meet
but yes, I know other people. Yeah.
they do end up meeting the right person where you wouldn't expect them. I mean, Canva could be a good example. Out of Australia in Perth, that's not where you would expect that amazing company to come out of.
Yes.
Because of these stories of amazing success where you don't expect them, it becomes like, oh, this is what you could expect. Versus it just happens to be on the right side of the power law, but this is very, very few of these examples. And most of them are more in the you need to be in the Bay Area, need to be in Bangalore, you need to be in London to get to this high concentration of needle, to go back to your analogy.
Yeah. So okay. So first of all, there's an enormous amount of luck, and I often say that I helped start a quantitative hedge fund at one point. Okay. So there you're like you do a zillion transactions, and then you're trying to get it right 60% of the time, and so you're like, whereas I will know if I'm good at this when I'm dead. By then, I'll have done enough deals that maybe we could get to statistical significance. Even then, it's not clear that we could. So it could all be luck. It could all be luck. And you could all be a conditional statement of luck where you got lucky at one point, your first deal, and then the deal flow started happening because good entrepreneurs will take you because you had good luck before. And then it's just like literally almost single shot luck. You did one great deal and or something else. You happen to be the person in semiconductors right before semiconductors blow up. So like all of your deals look like genius deals or something like that. Enormous amounts of luck. Uh, that actually drives a lot of incredible stupidity in the industry, where people then say, because most people feel like when from the outside it's like, oh, they're obvious when they're good, and they're not. So actually, one of the things I do in my class is I get early stage VCs to come in, and I have their latest entrepreneur pitch over video. The VCs in the class, the entrepreneur pitches over video. Then we turn off the entrepreneur, and everybody turns to the VC, and they're all like, "You invested in that? that's horrible." Like the students are like literally shocked that anybody would give that money. And it's like, oh, that's only because in hindsight they all look obvious. Airbnb, come on, that had to look really stupid, right? Like you're surfing couches, or there's no way like that would be obvious when you looked at it. It would not be obvious. Even Google, a new search engine, like whatever. There's lots of them, wildly successful ones. Why do you need a new one? So like they're not obvious, and it's all luck. So therefore, let me just do every random thing that comes my way. And so we get all this money pouring into like crazy bad ideas. And a lot of venture capital money is wasted down all that path. Uh, so I do think that there's luck. There's no question that there's luck involved. Even within a single firm, you see it bounce along, and then the ball bounces its way, and then it bounces against it. And it's not there's nothing that anybody did. The contract gets canceled for reasons having nothing to do with the firm, whatever it is. So there's just enormous amounts of luck down each one, let alone. But you definitely can improve your chances of getting lucky. And this is true in every aspect of life of like the harder I work, the luckier I get kind of lines. It's like
But I think it's true more when it's a distribution type of outcome, where if you work harder, you're more likely to get a better outcome. But when it's a power law, you may work 30% harder and not see anything. So this is where I think VT is quite different from most of the other places.
I think it's super painful because you're graded so clearly on so few shots on goal. Like if you're the best doctor, you're the best geriatrician. Like would anybody even know? I mean, like your patients would love you. You'd be giving great care. You'd feel really good about yourself. But if you're the second best geriatrician, like, you don't know. I don't know. Your patients will still love you. There's no here. We like do these tiny number of deals, a few a year, and then we have to keep that track record with us for life. And like,
I remember meeting someone who's been on the Midas list for quite a few times. I say, wow, that's amazing. He said, no, if I didn't make that one investment, I would never have made it. And it's really humbling in a way.
yes, it's really painful in a way, is what it is, because like in some sense, all I want to do is learn, and the number one thing I want to learn is what makes a great investment. And so we're constantly trying to ask ourselves what went right and what went wrong. Even because, like, even when we make money, we often go back and say that wasn't because of us. That was luck, right? Like we didn't. That's not what we thought it would do. We thought that, like, we wrote down in our initial memo the CEO was great, and then the CEO had to be fired, and the new CEO took it great. Okay, so wrong. Or we thought this was the reason they would win, and they win for this completely other reason, which we never saw coming. Okay, wrong. That doesn't make us great investors. That makes us lucky. And then sometimes, even when we it doesn't work out and we wrote down exactly why it wasn't going to work out, but we, there was some chance it did and some chance it didn't, we actually feel good about the investment. Like, it didn't work out, but it was a worthy bet, versus, like, oh, that was not a worthy bet, that was a bad bet, and we happen to get lucky and make money. And the ones we really like is where we really could call the reason why, and it happens that way. But the problem is, if that happened 10 times a year, maybe we'd be like, yes, now we know it. It happens so infrequently that you're like poring over the tiny amounts of data that you have.
So I smell a best practice here. You said when we go back. So I feel like you have that discipline of looking at the outcomes, going back to why you decided to invest. Can you speak to that best practice? Because I think that's fundamental to even learning.
So we do it all the time, not even when we get an exit. We do it like all along the way. Is this what we said it was going to do? Is this where we are? We're trying to just sort of evaluate our decision making along the way, because it is very easy to, in hindsight, once it's all exited, tell yourself that you nailed it. And we do this all the time. We say things like, oh, I was always worried about that co-founder, yeah, yeah. And then we go look at the memo. Nope. We all said that co-founder was great. And it's not, we're lying to ourselves. So it's not that we're like trying to lie. It's like, but the problem is, over time we got less and less enamored with that co-founder, or we thought, oh yeah, well, our go-to-market is great. And then over time we got less and less enamored with that go-to-market, and we found a different one. And our mind just fills in that, like, yeah, we saw that new go-to-market was going to be great. You go back and look, and you're like, no, 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 you thought that other go-to-market was awesome. So you got to be writing it down. You will never remember why you did a deal. You will make stuff up. This is the human condition about memory. Memory, we have the strangest creatures in this sense, in my mind. We have a memory, right? But the weirdest thing about our memory is that we have this belief that our memory is accurate. So at like almost a core sense, like if I asked you to describe your drive to work today, whatever, if you drove to work, you would be like, yeah, I remember my drive to work. The answer is, no, you do not. And if I told you, you could like recall parts of it, but your brain would fill in all sorts of nonsense that was like, yeah, we drove along, it was raining, whatever. You do not. And that's like the thing that happened just a few minutes ago. By the way, they've done tests on this. They have people walk around town, and then they show them videos of the walk that they just took, and they go, yeah, yeah, I remember that. And they go, that's not the walk you just took.
That's not.
That's not. That's somebody else's walk. And they're like, they literally, the odds of them getting it right and wrong is 50-50. They have as much shot of getting it right as wrong, because they show a video of like approximately the same walk, but it's not theirs.
Wow.
So like, our memories are horrible. So you've got to be writing it down, and you've got to be clear to yourself, and you've got to go review what you wrote. Otherwise, you will be sure that you made the decision for some reason. You're just fooling yourself. I mean, it's not that you're lying to anybody. You're sure you made the decision with this in mind, and you go back and look, and you're like, oh my god.
It's not about bad intent or good intent. It's just you don't remember. And if you haven't written it down, committed to writing,
Yes. And it's even worse than you don't remember. It's that you do remember incorrectly. and you're convinced that you remember correctly. This is the part that's so wacky. It's this, you do have a full memory of it. You can like describe the investment committee meeting. Like, I remember being in the meeting and I argued for this. And then you look and you're like, no, you didn't. That's right. I didn't. Why do I have a memory of arguing for that? And it's because at some point later, we rediscussed the deal, right? You changed your thinking on the deal. We were talking about the deal. It's not that you completely made stuff up. At some point, you really did shift your thinking about. You remember the follow on, yes, right? Or you remember some discussion at the exit. You remember something. So really try to write it down and write not just will this work or not. So even deals you don't do, try to write down why you think it won't work. Because the fact that it doesn't work is like, okay, a lot of them don't work. Maybe it was a good bet, right? If we had a 10% chance of curing cancer, we should take it. It's just a 90% chance it doesn't work. But we knew that going in. Still a good idea at the right price. And so you have to write down, like, why do you think it will fail? You like, oh, I think this team can't work together, or I think this go-to-market is completely wrong and would be too costly, all right? So you can actually go back and say, that didn't work, and I called it. Like I knew why.
That is actually really good advice. Yes. Now, let's talk about luck and lack of recently. I think 2025 is very hard on VCs. I'm expecting 2026.
Such a good year. My annual letter at the end of last year was like I wrote the word liquidity in it. Like it's always a mistake. I think I jinxed us all.
It was you. Okay, now we know.
It was me. I mean, I own some big companies that were gonna go public, and like we were like, yes, we're all good here. It's gonna be a great year. We're gonna get M&A. We're gonna get IPOs. Yeah, yeah,
I said the same. So I think we were two people to jinx it.
yes.
But what do you think of 2025, second half, 2026? Rather than committing it writing in your newsletter, you're doing it in the podcast now. What do you think? It feels like, of course, it's no longer zero interest. Of course, there is no M&A and IPO going back to the LPs. Even the endowment funds, which are good LPs, now we need to redirect the money for the universities that don't get their grants. And I mean, it feels like the worst case scenario. And so many startups goes to investment bankers. So now they have too many to choose and very few buyers. So how do we get out of this bad luck?
Uncertainty, we know. I mean, all economists, all of economics is like basically uncertainty is the worst. All we want is steadiness, steady inflation at the right. We want steady, known 2%. We want all these nice, steady, known. That's what does it. So for whatever, whether you're pro Trump or against or whatever, the thing that's driving me crazy is even if you were like for all the ideas,
Hmm.
if we could just do them in a way that didn't create massive uncertainty, but instead laid out what was going to happen, then implemented, then went through, it would be so much better for all of business. And so it's just the uncertainty is killing all of us. Everybody just sort of stops in the face of uncertainty. We can't. I don't know which way to plan. Should I move my manufacturing onshore? Should I move it to Vietnam? Should I move it out of Vietnam? Should I? But I don't know. So I don't want to make some giant move only to find out, well, that was, incredibly dumb because everything changed again. So instead, we do nothing. When we do nothing, we shrink or contract, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as long as this uncertainty continues, stating the incredibly obvious, it will not be good for us. That said, I mean, I'm an early stage VC. So on the technology side, obviously the technologies and the agentic and the innovations in AI and chips, and it's just incredible moment. So, um, there's money and there's uncertainty, but I often describe us as like we're fishing at the bottom of the ocean in our scuba gear. And yes, what happens on the surface does tend to stir up silt and knock us around a little bit, but really our business has got to get up off the ground. They got to grow. They got years and years and years ahead of them. And so the things we're doing today, they'll be ripe in 5 to 7 years, who knows what the world will be like then? And there's incredible opportunity there.
So, which actually, I think you're leading me to my final question, which is, what are you the most hopeful for the next 2 years?
2 years. 2 years is like too short run for me. I it, to me, there's just these incredible trends around how the world will change. Everybody always overhypes what will happen in 2 years and understands what will happen in 10 or 20. And we will the way the world will change when we all have AI co-pilots and agents that are helping us in sort of every aspect of our lives. We're not all going to lose our jobs, okay? We're not. Everybody, the efficiency is going to become remarkable.
All augmented.
We're all going to be augmented. There's nothing's going to be figuring out when soccer practices is going to be augmented, and who should pick up the kids when will be augmented by some AI that tells that mom to grab these three kids and drop. Like, it'll be all sorts of weird ways, but it will not happen next year. And no humanoid robot is going to get my mail. I'm sorry. I'm a little negative on that one.
Oh, you're being tough on me. I invested in agility robotics. So I do want them to go and help a lot.
But but over time, these things will have just truly remarkable impact. It's always a little scary how the world will be different than what we're used to, but I think for the most part, it'll be a really neat world, and not one where we're all unemployed. 200 years ago, 79% of the world was employed in farming, food production. And then 100 years ago, it was still 26%, and it's 2% today. It's like if you had told anybody that 100 years ago or 200 years ago, they would have said, well, we're just going to have these massive unemployment lines where we hand out food for all the people who are not employed in food production. And of course, today that's like a laughable answer. Like, what are you talking about? We literally have almost no unemployment. Like, we have dramatically low unemployment, and 2% of people do food. We do a whole bunch of stuff that you couldn't have even described to somebody 100 years ago, let alone 200 years ago. And what will we do in the future? I don't know. A bunch of stuff that's really hard to even describe to someone today.
I think even 20 years ago would be like a shock.
Shock. A shock that everything's done over video, that we never go anywhere anymore. Like a shock for all sorts of things. That we can bank in a second, that I can send a wire to a new company with a few taps of my thumb. Something that used to be, I mean, we used to sign all these ink paper things and got like FedEx them around. And God, getting a wire out of your bank was like a 2-day event. Like,
Okay, so there's a lot to be hopeful. Matt, thank you so much for your time today. You gave a lot of golden nuggets. Those three words I will remember is what is you? That was so good.
thanks for having me. It's fun to be here.
Thank you.